Well, hello there. Happy Wednesday to you all. It's so good to see you this beautiful Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us for Daily Devotions, the Redeeming Life Fellowship. And today, as we're following our reading plan, we're going to be in Luke chapter 7, verses 1 through 35. In the first half of this, you'll find a familiar passage about Jesus and the centurion. The second one, rather unique to Luke, where Jesus raises a widow's son. But our focus is going to be on verses 18 through 35, which is about Jesus and John the Baptist. And it's a really fascinating passage to me in my mind for this particular reason, is that by this time, Jesus, in doing his ministry, proclaiming the kingdom of God and teaching and working miracles, he has been doing long enough by this time to have something called a reputation, where he's not just doing this type of work, but that word is catching around about what Jesus is doing, what Jesus is saying, and that people are beginning to make up their minds about who Jesus is. And what's so interesting about this is that in Luke, it's actually even in all the Gospels really, that the response to Jesus's ministry is profoundly mixed. That for some people, it's about excitement and religious fervor. For some people, it's about just the possibility of being healed, for goodness sake. Because if you're a cripple and you're healed, well, that changes your life pretty significantly. If Jesus can heal you, well then, wow, that's a real game changer, isn't it? Then for some people, it's just met with hostility, as it was when Jesus was preaching in his hometown and people wanted to push him off a cliff. That gets a little crazy. But then for some people, it's about, righteous indignance about somebody who could claim that he's going to, forgive sin, for goodness sake. Who can forgive sins but God alone? And yet, even amidst all of those, there's still some people, a group of disciples, people who have, like Levi, abandoned everything, and like Simon and James and John, who abandon everything and they just follow Jesus. Everybody seems to have a different response to Jesus, his words and his ministry, and also the reputation that, am I going to see Jesus for who he is, or am I going to make my assumptions based upon what I hear everybody else saying about him? And that's an important thing for us, because I think for a lot of us, it's easier to want to make our judgments based upon what this person says or that person says, and not actually listen to Jesus for himself and hear what it is that he has to say, to see what it is that he's doing, and to heed seriously his call upon our lives to come and follow him. And in the midst of all of this, action and dialogue and conflict and controversy, there's one key figure who by this point has actually been kind of forgotten in the narrative, but he takes the center stage almost from the very beginning of the book, and that's John the Baptist. He was the one who God had chosen and set apart as a forerunner for Jesus to prepare people for his ministry. And where has he been all this time? And here's one of the interesting things to me, is that if there was ever somebody who would be a fitting candidate for somebody who would be a disciple of Jesus, if you were trying to picture in your mind the ideal disciple, somebody who would seem to be cut out for the job, you might think John the Baptist was one of them. But what we happen to know from the gospel accounts is that he was actually arrested fairly early on in Jesus's ministry. But that even after that, John himself continued to have disciples, presumably carrying on John's ministry while John was in prison, because he can't do much baptizing while you're in a prison cell. And what we'll find here in this case is John from his prison cell getting access to two of his disciples and going to Jesus and saying, "Are you the one who is going to be coming, or should we be expecting someone else?" That even John the Baptist, would have to hear and see what it is about who Jesus is, what he is doing, what he has been teaching, to make a decision whether or not that he believes that Jesus was who he said he was. And here's another interesting point. When John the Baptist speaks about this one who's coming, who's more powerful than I, the thongs of whose sandals I'm unworthy to untie, not unwilling, unworthy to untie. And he says his winnowing fork is in his hand to clear his threshing floor, and he's going to burn up his chaff with unquenchable fire. While all of those things can be true, it's possible that John really did expect Jesus to come in power, and power that translates to judgment, a lot sooner than what he might have been expected. And that's a good lesson for us, as far as to say, oftentimes we have these weighty and pregnant expectations for God to do certain things, but not in a way or as quickly as sometimes we expect or hope him to. And John could feel this kind of weight of wondering and disappointment and uncertainty about whether or not Jesus really was, the Son of God. John is an honest doubter in this case. Not doubt in the sense that his faith or his trust in God is wavering, but that it's something that he's unsure about at this moment where he's in prison. And so let's read about what happens here when John is wanting to find out the certainty of this stuff. And so it says, in beginning in verse 18, John's disciples told him all these things. Calling two of them, he sent them to the Lord to ask, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" When the men came to Jesus, they said, "John the Baptist sent us to ask, 'Are you the one who was to come, or should we expect someone else?'" At that very time, Jesus cured many who had diseases, sicknesses, and evil spirits, and gave sight to many who were blind. So he replied to the messengers, "Go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is preached to the poor. Blessed is the man who does not fall away on account of me." That's the news, the message, the word that John needs to hear in prison. That even though the power to come and bring judgment is still forthcoming, but that this power that's coming is working the same miracles that were expected when John was commissioned and he knew that he was fulfilling God's call to be able to prepare a way in the desert for the Lord to come, and that the kingdom of God would be manifest in their midst. And that this is actually happening. Look at it and see for yourself if this is truly Emmanuel, God with us, the kingdom of God here in the flesh of space, time, and history. After John's messengers left, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. "What did you go out into the desert to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No, those who wear expensive clothes and indulge in luxury are in palaces. But what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, 'I will send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way before you.' And I tell you, among those born of women, there is no one greater than John. Yet, the one who is least in the kingdom of God is greater than he." Let's pause there for a second. There's no one born of women who is greater than John, yet the one who is least in the kingdom of God is greater than he. What that suggests to me is that there is this sphere of the kingdom of God that you can enter into the kingdom of God, be a part of the kingdom of God, through following Jesus, and this remains still a choice that John and his disciples, John the Baptist and his disciples, still have to make. And that by hearing this testimony of John's disciples, who are taking it back to John the Baptist, they can see, wow, the kingdom of God really is here. It's before our very eyes, and it's time for us to be able to make the decision to follow Jesus, to not just be a part of this John the Baptist movement, but the kingdom of God movement, because we want to be a part of what God is doing through this person called Jesus. And that this is a decision that even John the Baptist and even John the Baptist's disciples still have to make for themselves. They can't presume on being the front runners of God, that therefore, because they were a part of that automatically gets them in. They still have to make the decision to follow Jesus. John the Baptist and John's disciples still have to make the decision to follow Jesus. And it says, here we go, verse 29, all the people, even the tax collectors, when they heard Jesus' words, acknowledged that God's way was right, because they had been baptized by John. But the Pharisees and the experts of the law rejected God's purposes for them, because they had not been baptized by John. So Luke makes it clear that there is a direct correlation between people who respond well to Jesus' ministry as a result, because they were baptized by John. And if they weren't baptized by John, they really didn't receive Jesus' ministry very well. Again, this profound variance in responses to Jesus' ministry. And then here it goes. This gets to the crunch of the matter. Verse 31. To what then can I compare the people of this generation? What are they like? They are like children sitting in the marketplace and calling out to each other. We played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not cry. What's happening there, you could think of this about children playing in the marketplace. And if you've ever had children who come up to you and want you to play with them, either you engage or you don't. Either you respond to what it is that they're doing, or you're just indifferent and would rather be dismissive about them. And there's really only one of those two options. And what Jesus is saying, this generation, it's like these stubborn, highbrow adults who are too proud of themselves to respond to a child who says, we played this for you and you didn't do anything. Because frankly, you're a people who are self-satisfied and impossible to please. Let's carry on. It says this, for John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say, he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say, here is a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and sinners. So regardless of whether you choose the fasting route or the celebration route, this generation will always find some reason to criticize Jesus and to say it's not good enough for us. They won't be satisfied. They won't be pleased, because nothing will satisfy you people. That's what Jesus is saying. But lastly, it says, but wisdom is proved right by all her children. After reading all of this, this puts us in the position, certainly in the position of John the Baptist and his disciples, who say, we're looking and hearing about what Jesus is doing. We hear about his reputation. How is it that we are going to respond, and that the responsibility to respond well to this thing does fall on us? The choice is yours. The choice is mine. It's a daily choice about whether or not we are going to look to Jesus as this wonderful miracle worker, that will despise him as a person who exposes our sinful nature. We might even call him a liar or a lunatic, or we can call him Lord, and we can bow at his feet and worship him. That's the choice that I want to make today, is to worship him for who he is, and follow him as his disciple, because that's what we're doing here at Redeeming Life, growing mature disciples who make an impact in a city like Columbia City and Whitley County. So that's all we have for today, but thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get daily notifications, and I hope to be seeing you very soon, whether here on the channel or live in person, as we're meeting at the Peabody Library presently. And I pray God would bless you and keep you and continue to change, shape, and mold and renew each and every one of us as we follow Jesus as his disciples. So God bless you. Take care.